Let's bring in former Energy Secretary and former Texas Governor Rick Perry to discuss further. Governor, good to see you. So listen, Governor, you have a lot of oil and gas jobs in Texas. The federal government is waging war on fossil fuels. Is there any way that state governments can protect these industries from these radicals in the federal government?
Well, I can promise you the state of Texas is going to be suing them very often, just as we did. I was the governor of the state of Texas. But here's what's more important, and it's the truth of the matter. The United States lowered its emissions more than any other country in the world over the last decade, and it was because we transitioned from old, inefficient power plants to cleaner burning natural gas plants. And the same thing could be happening in a lot of places around the world, except the Biden administration is in a war against American fossil fuels. And we're not allowing American LNG, for instance, to leave the Gulf Coast of Texas, the Gulf Coast of the United States, and go to Europe to help them offset going back to burning coal again. So the idea that these words that you hear are just that. They are false words coming from false prophets. If you want to know the truth about what's happening with fossil fuels and the truth about what's happening on the climate, go pick up a copy of Alex Epstein's book, Fossil Future. It is a true account of what is happening in the world and why it's so important that we continue to use fossil fuels, using them in a very thoughtful, a very environmentally friendly way. And that's the real future of the world. But this administration not only is going to drive America into a massive recession, we're also going to hurt the climate as a whole, because people are going to transition back to those old coal-burning plants in Europe like they're doing right now, because they don't have access to clean-burning American natural gas.
Or that the electric vehicles that we're all being forced to drive ultimately, say through tailpipe regulations, actually emit more carbon than internal combustion engines. I digress, Governor, but it's the lack of a basic cost-benefit analysis by these morons in charge of the federal government that baffles me. Sean talked about the analysis of these marathon jobs from this refinery shutting down. Just what about the fact that when you make an electric vehicle, it requires less than half the workers needed to make a gasoline-powered vehicle? Have the unions not woken up to that?
Well, listen, I think they just walk lockstep with the Democrat Party too often, not really thinking about what does it do to our membership. But let me share with you reality. Biden stood up in front of the world and said, we're going to take care of our European friends after the war in Ukraine started because the Russians cut off the fuel. And he stood up and clearly told them, we're going to make sure that you have the fuel that you need. Well, guess what's happening right now in the United States? The Department of Energy is not going forward with permits on the Gulf Coast in Lake Charles, Louisiana, for instance. They're not going forward with the permitting of an LNG facility there for a couple of big major companies that I know of. And I mean, the fallacies here that this administration is spewing are just stunning. And we've got to stand up and point this out and show the American people that if you care about the climate, if you care about this planet, you need to be in favor of American natural gas displacing all of these old, inefficient coal plants around the world. And this administration is making it harder to do that.
I want to drive us into the dark ages, Governor, but you're a Texas guy, and I want to talk to you about Texas because we're inching closer to the end of Title 42, and tens of thousands of migrants are just waiting to cross into the U.S. But one Democrat has the audacity to say that Biden is ensuring order at the border after House Republicans ordered up their own plan. Listen to this.
We have to make sure that there's order at the border, as President Biden has continued to do. But I have every confidence that President Biden and the administration are going to take the appropriate steps to address comprehensive immigration reform issues, as well as issues that exist on the border. In terms of the extreme MAGA Republican plan on immigration, that's just another dead on arrival bill catering to the far right extreme of the Republican Party.
I mean, Governor, that's insanity. But let me ask you this: is there order at the border? Is he lying to the American people?
I don't know who that individual is. I didn't recognize his voice, but I'll bet you one thing: he's never been on the border of the state of Texas or the border of the United States. Not within the last 4 or 5 years, as we've seen this become a true calamity. What's going to happen when Title 42 is going to be a massive rush on the border, because this is how the cartels work. They will drive people to the border, and these are people that are trying to get across who would like to be American, live in America, enjoy the good things that go on here. And at the same time, because of this massive amount of people that are going to be coming in, that the cartels are going to be driving there, they know that our Border Patrol and our law enforcement don't have the numbers to be able to handle all of that. And they'll go use the rest of the border to bring in their drugs and to bring in the criminal element that can't get in here otherwise, because we would check and find out that they're bad people and we can't get them in. So this is a plan that the cartels have been putting into place. The Biden administration and whoever that member of Congress was is part of the cartel's efforts.
Governor, thank you so much for being here. You covered it all for us. Thank you. Rick Perry.
Hey, God bless you. So long.
God bless you.